Good to have you with us on the Jimbo Hannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Judge still has to agree, but the Justice Department's all set to go along. It looks as though, in fact, the merger of American Airlines and U.S. Airways will go through with a few conditions. They got to give up some landing slots and passenger gates at some major airports. Now then, those will go to other carriers, increasing choice for consumers, and it is hoped lowering prices. Okay. Let's take a look at the impact here with our guest in this portion of the program, Cathi Banks, Vice President of the firm LegacyTravel.com. Good to have you on tonight.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Your thoughts about this, the merging and merging and merging. We're down pretty much to the big four, Delta, United, Southwest, and American. How much further does this go?
I hope not any further, that's for sure. Now, I would prefer that we still had all the airlines that we had to start with, because I do think that more competition is a good thing for the consumer. But I think that once Delta and Northwest merged back several years ago, and then United and Continental merged, I think that U.S. Air and American merging was inevitable, because I don't think they would have been able to compete otherwise.
Why is it that in the era of deregulation we have seen more and more airlines go under? I mean, the idea a few years ago of no longer having a Pan Am or a TWA seemed unthinkable.
I think the airline business it's very hard to make money. You've got, fuel costs and labor costs, and it seems like with most airlines except, say, Southwest, the relations with labor are so contentious, and it's just hard to run a company that way. And so it's just a hard business to be in.
Under the old era, of course, the regulated era of the Civil Aeronautics Board, pretty much you had prices set. You had made the air industry almost a semi-public utility. But nobody went under, even under those circumstances. The marketplace kicks in, and the marketplace promptly kills airlines right and left.
Right. I think that when the fares were regulated, you didn't have one airline trying to come in and undercut another airline. Like, for instance, JetBlue came in, I think it was day before yesterday, before the settlement was announced, and had a $55 sale to customers in Washington, D.C., because they were trying to make a statement that they wanted the combined airline to have to give up all but 55 of their slots at Washington Reagan if the merger were to go through. And so, here you've got JetBlue giving away seats for $55. It's kind of hard to make money at that rate.
Is that a predatory practice or just good business?
Well, I think in this case I wouldn't call it predatory. I wouldn't necessarily call it good business either. In this case, I think they were just trying to make a splash, and I think they succeeded. But I think in order to be predatory, the company being a predator needs to be larger than the company being preyed upon.
Well, that would certainly be true. But if I'm not mistaken, it is, if you are a company which lowers prices to below the cost of producing something. That is, if I start selling widgets at $1 a widget, even though it costs me $1.10 to make one, and my sole goal is to drive out of business that other widget company over there, I believe that puts you afoul of federal law, does it not?
Well, not being an attorney, I would have to defer to an expert on that. But
well, I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty sure that is the case. I'm just wondering, sure. When you see these airline games like this, I'm sure that Blue is not having any illusions of driving anybody out of business. But when you sell something at what is essentially below cost, that's an interesting tactic, to say the least. When you actually are losing money, clearly you think you're gaining something.
Right, you have a dog in the fight somewhere.
Yeah, but what are they gaining other than just a little publicity here? We've been giving them all kinds of free publicity.
Well, for one thing, as it happens with the settlement, the combined airline is being required to divest themselves of gates at several airports all over the country. And Washington Reagan, they're having to get rid of a bunch of gates, and so JetBlue is going to be able to scoop up a bunch of gates at Reagan that they didn't have before.
Yeah. Also, we're told that the new American has to agree for at least 3 years to maintain hubs in several key cities, such as Chicago, Miami, and Los Angeles. Given the regional importance of those airports, why would they have to be forced to maintain hubs there? Aren't those rather natural hub locations?
Well, yeah, I believe so, and I think it would have been a no-brainer. But besides the Justice Department, the attorneys general of, I think it was 6 states, joined with the Justice Department in this lawsuit against the merger. And it was the states of the lawsuit, the people that joined the Justice Department in the lawsuit. It was HUDs in those states that they had to agree to maintain. Texas being one of them, where I am, by the way.
Well, now, isn't Texas, Dallas to be precise, that's the ancestral home of American Airlines before they picked up TWA and now picked up U.S. Air along the way. Are they thinking of leaving their base, which is what that's always been?
Well, there's no indication that they were considering it, but now they have to stay here for at least 5 years.
Interesting. I found it amazing that anybody would have to make them do that. I don't fully understand some of the concept of hub cities. I suppose it's meant to save money some way. I know that from my own perspective, when the TWA went out of business, I fly back to Missouri a great deal, and that was always a standard process. You fly back to Lambert, St. Louis, and then you go from there maybe to Springfield or Columbia or wherever. These days, of course, if I want to fly back to Missouri, I almost inevitably have to go from Washington, D.C., mind you, to Missouri. I have to go through either Chicago or Dallas or, in some cases, Atlanta. Now, clearly, the airlines flying me there are burning a lot more gas or jet fuel. What's the benefit of closing these hub airports? Is it really that much cheaper to close down a hub and zigzag halfway around the continent?
And the reason you used to fly to St. Louis and then to Springfield is because for TWA, St. Louis was the hub. It wasn't that they didn't have a hub. It happened to be convenient for you.
I mean, Lambert, St. Louis is a ghost town now. I mean, my goodness, it's an airport that's probably more like the size of the Wichita airport these days.
Right, exactly. Taking a hub out of a place definitely has an impact. But, you know, the hub and spoke system does allow the airlines to provide service to cities that may not have air service otherwise. Because if you're taking everybody, you bring everyone that wants to go to Springfield, let's say, and let's bring them to a central hub. Let's use Dallas in this example. Then you pooled everybody, and now you can fill a plane to go to Springfield. Whereas if you said, okay, this guy wants to go from Washington to Springfield, and this guy wants to go from California to Springfield, there wouldn't be enough people any other place to fill up an airplane.
Well, there was before. Again, as far as I know, that no one ever lost money flying out of the St. Louis hub. But anyway, from the standpoint, in other words, I guess a hub doesn't have to be anywhere near the actual route. I suppose it's not inconceivable that if you wanted to fly from Phoenix to Salt Lake City, you might have to go through Atlanta.
Well, except that Salt Lake City is a hub for Delta.
Yeah, but I'll put it as well. I'll make up some other cities. Let's say you wanted to go from Tucson to Bismarck, North Dakota. I mean, the fact of the matter is the zigzags, for the layperson, the zigzags don't make a lot of sense unless the cost of fuel just isn't that much.
Well, and we all know the cost of fuel is that much.
Exactly. So therefore, as the layperson, I'm sitting here scratching my head wondering, okay, then what's in it for them? Why? Obviously, I can tell you what's in it for me. More time spent in airplanes and in airports as I get my tour of the country that I don't really care to have, but I just don't see what's in it for the airlines.
The more hubs you have across the country, if you diffuse your hubs, then you water down the advantage of the hub system. The more people you bring together to then take to those outlying destinations, then it makes it more feasible to have more service to the smaller airports.
Yeah, so theoretically, my example of Tucson to Atlanta to Bismarck might actually work. I made it up to be as ridiculous as possible, but perhaps my imagination does not exceed what the airlines are willing to do.
Well, and in this case, Phoenix, of course, is a hub for U.S. Air, and they're going to have to stay there because Arizona was one of the states as well. So in this case, it would be Phoenix. But anyway.
Fair enough. More to come. Stay with us as we try to make sense of the airlines and what they're doing, what they're being allowed to do, what in some cases they're being forced to do, with Cathi Banks with the firm LegacyTravel.com. Back in a moment. The Jim Bohannon Show. We're delighted that you're with us tonight at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. If you've got questions or concerns about the crazy quilt that is American air transportation, why, you can ask our guest, Cathi Banks, Vice President with LegacyTravel.com. 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 This is essentially a travel agency, right?
Correct.
What's the role of the travel agency today in this modern era of air travel, and how has it changed with all of the merging?
The travel agent is an advocate for a consumer. For instance, now, since there's fewer airlines, so there's less competition, so you have to be a little more creative in order to get the most value for your money. And a travel agent sits and has hands in airfares all day long, all week long, and so there would be things that we can figure out how to do, alternatives we can suggest that would help a consumer save money, be more convenient, not to mention somebody that would be an intermediary that would have a relationship with you that can represent you, say, if there's a big event happens, say, out at the L.A. airport when it completely shut down because of that gunman that was there, just helping in all sorts of situations. Now, there isn't anyone wandering around trying to figure out how to fly between Dallas and Houston, for instance. That doesn't require a whole lot of hand-holding. But in a lot of situations, it's appropriate.
I'm wondering how your business has been altered by websites like Travelocity and Orbitz and the like.
Yeah, absolutely, and we get asked that all the time. I sometimes joke that I'm going to come up with a different career to say that I am at cocktail parties, because that's the first question everyone asks. Usually the way I come back to people is say, well, what industry are you in, and how has the Internet changed your industry? Because it's changed every industry, not just ours. But, yeah, definitely, there have always been avenues for people to research things directly, and some people enjoy doing that. For some people, part of the joy of their vacation or their trip is the research phase of it, and that's great. If you love doing that, you could do it 20 years ago. You could do it now, even easier. So have at it. But there are some people who value the assistance of a professional, whether that's an interior decorator or, I don't know, an architect or an attorney or whatever. But there are people who value the opinion of a professional, and that's the role that we fill.
Absolutely, and I must say that the notion of people who actually enjoy navigating these websites is, I don't know, akin, I guess, to hitting yourself on the head with a hammer, because it feels so good when you stop. You, I understand, are a consultant in the custom European travel planning. Does traveling overseas from the planning perspective differ that significantly from traveling here?
Well, it does, simply because, for instance, let's say if you called me for a beach vacation. Well, there's a bunch of different very simple options for packages that I can put you in touch with. We can discuss the pros and cons of the various resorts. But when you're talking about Europe, most people don't go to Europe and just go to one city. Usually you're going to go here, and then you're going to go here, and you're going to go here. And so we need to get between the cities, and there's different lodging accommodations have to be made. There's tours in each of the cities. So it's just more complex for most people that go to Europe as opposed to other types of vacations.
I note that some of the hubs that we've been talking about under the American U.S. merger here, American, Dallas-Fort Worth, Chicago O'Hare, Miami, New York LaGuardia, Los Angeles LAX, and New York JFK. For U.S. Air, Charlotte, Philadelphia, Phoenix, and Washington Reagan. Do we know which hubs will remain once American U.S. Air becomes a single entity?
Nothing will happen right away. They haven't announced any plans to shut down any hubs of either carrier. Now, the ones where they're being forced to give up landing rights or slots, gates, are Reagan National, New York LaGuardia, and then Boston, Chicago, L.A., Dallas, Miami. Those are the cities where they're being forced to give up gates, but they haven't announced any plans to shut down any of the hubs.
Fair enough. Stay with us. More to come. Our guest, again, is Cathi Banks, Vice President of LegacyTravel.com. We're looking at the airline mergers and what it means for all of us. Back in a moment. Good to have you with us on the Jim Bohannon Show with our guest, Cathi Banks, Vice President of LegacyTravel.com, as we look at the airline mergers that have taken place. To what extent do you think we will see any growth of the discount airline business model, the Southwest model, as some of my friends have rather nastily put it, the cattle car model?
I think it's going to be interesting to see with all of these gates becoming available at these profitable airports that have been profitable for airlines in the past. Now, you have to admit that the airline industry seems to have a rather high barrier to entry. I mean, it isn't like you can just hang a shingle and all of a sudden you have airplanes to fly around. So it costs a lot of money to start an airline. But I think with fewer airlines, it does leave a void in the marketplace for more competition. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how many new entries we have in that market.
There's been an awful lot of growth for discount airlines, if I'm not mistaken. Southwest, I guess, has never been in any kind of financial danger, while the traditional model has had victims falling right and left. What's the appeal of that? Is that just for people who otherwise wouldn't fly? Because I'll be honest with you, I flew Southwest in my life one time, and we'll probably leave it at one unless I'm in a situation I can't get out of.
Well, and I'd be interested to know what you didn't enjoy about Southwest.
Oh, I just, I don't know. I guess these days probably it wouldn't make that much difference. At the time, I didn't enjoy the lack of amenities. These days, of course, no one has amenities, so.
Right. Well, and the thing that Southwest has going for them, and you really have to take your hat off to Southwest, their employees are happy to be there. They're happy for you to be there. They have a good relationship with the airline. They're loyal to the airline. There's not this just seething animosity that you kind of feel when you're on an airplane these days. I'm a fan of Southwest. Now, I do prefer to have an assigned seat. I'm a lifetime gold on a million miler with American Airlines, so I enjoy all the amenities that I get on American, but I really do have to hand it to Southwest.
I mean, yeah, with the no assigned seats, you know, you get into sort of a dash to see who can avoid the middle seat.
Well, but they've gotten smart. You can actually pay a fee to be in that first group that boards.
Yeah.
And if you're in the first group, then there's really not a problem getting a seat.
I would dare say.
Yeah.
In any event, what's the future of all of this? Are we going to see, again, any likely candidates of dropping the 4 down to 3 airlines?
Boy, if I were to be able to tell the future, I would just certainly hope not. Certainly our great country can support 4 airlines. I think we're big enough. We fly all over the world. I think 4 is few enough. I think if we see another round of mergers, who knows, maybe we'll get down to just 1 airline. I think I mentioned that I would have rather seen the Justice Department put a stop to the mergers before they all started so that we would have 8 or 9 viable airlines. But they didn't, so now we're down to 4. But I really hope that this is the end of it, but who knows? In
some areas of mergers and questions of antitrust, the Justice Department has been rather inconsistent. For example, you could argue that probably in my business of broadcasting. In terms of the airlines, has the Justice Department at least maintained a consistent policy on what is or is not a permissible level of merging?
My feeling is that they kind of woke up when American and U.S. Air said they were going to merge and said, hey, wait, we're not going to have enough airlines. It's kind of like they shut the barn door after the horse was gone, kind of. So to my knowledge, they didn't really put up as big a fight with the other mergers as they did with this one. I wonder if the attorneys general that were a part of the lawsuit maybe kind of woke the Justice Department up in this case. I really don't know about the internal workings of why they chose this one, but it does feel like they kind of were more picky about this particular one than the previous one.
Fair enough. Stay on the line. We'll speak off air. Again, we're looking at the airline mergers that have taken place, and we're now down to the 4 major air carriers, Delta, United, Southwest, and American, pending the likely approval of the American U.S. Airways merger. And we're talking with Cathi Banks, Vice President of the firm LegacyTravel.com. We're approaching a time of year, of course, when people are doing more and more travel, and it'll be interesting to see how that changes as the airline industry itself changes down the road. I'm Jim Bohannon, and this is Westwood One.